I'd like to call the meeting to order and welcome everyone in attendance. The committee has under consideration the estimates of the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General for the fiscal year ending March 31st, 2023. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. Minister, please introduce the officials who are joining you at the table.
I apologize, Madam Chair. Thank you. First of all, thank you, Tyler Shandro, the MLA for Calgary-Acadia, and the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. I have with us today, we have the Deputy Minister for the Ministry, Frank Bosca, QC. We also have Dennis Cooley, the Associate Deputy Minister, Solicitor General. We have Brad Smith, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Financial Services and Senior Financial Officer. Also with us today are Kim Goddard, the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service, Fiona Lavoie, the Assistant Deputy Minister for Correctional Services, Barb Martini, who's the Acting Assistant Deputy Minister for SSI, Strategic Support and Integrated Initiatives, Lisa Tchir, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Legal Services, Marlene DeGran, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister for Public Security, Barb Turner, Acting Assistant Deputy Minister for Court and Justice Services, Brad Wells, the Executive Director for Financial Services, and I haven't forgotten anyone, have I forgotten? And that's everyone, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. My name is Jackie Lovely and I'm the MLA for Camrose and the Chair of the Committee. We'll begin starting to my right with introductions.
Good morning, Michaela Fry, Brooks Medicine Hat.
Good morning, Roger Reid, MLA for Livingston McLeod.
Good morning, Mark Smith, Great Delegate.
Good morning, Richard Gottfried, MLA for Calgary Fish Creek.
Good morning, Jordan Walker, Sherwood Park.
And across the table.
Irfan Sabir, MLA, Calgary Bholar McCall.
David Shepherd, MLA for Edmonton City Centre.
Jasbir Diol, MLA for Edmonton Meadows.
Drew Barnes, MLA, Cypress Medicine Hat.
Jody, you never introduce yourself. Okay, no problem. Now we'll go to those participating remotely. Mr. Hunter.
Yes, Grad Hunter, Tabor Warner.
And I see we have a guest, Leela.
Good morning, MLA Leela Sharon here, just near Strathmore.
Welcome, everyone. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Mr. Shepherd substituting as Deputy Chair for Ms. Sigurdsson, and Mr. Walker is substituting for Mr. Amory. So thank you very much, everyone. So a few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard. Committee proceedings are being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and visual stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Members participating remotely are encouraged to have your camera on while speaking and your microphone muted when not speaking. Remote participants who wish to be placed on speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk. And members in the room are asked to please signal to the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Honourable members, the standing order set out in the process for consideration of the main estimates, a total of 3 hours, has been scheduled for consideration of the estimates for the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General. Standing Order 59.016 establishes the speaking rotation and speaking times. In brief, the Minister will have 10 minutes to address the committee. At the conclusion of the Minister's comments, a 60-minute speaking block for the official opposition begins, followed by a 20-minute speaking block for independent members, then a 20-minute speaking block for government caucus. Individuals may only speak for up to 10 minutes at a time, but time may be combined between the member and minister. After this rotation of speaking time, will then follow the same rotation of the official opposition, independent members, and the government caucus. The member and the minister may speak once for a maximum of 5 minutes, or these times may be combined, making it a 10-minute block. If members have any questions regarding speaking times or rotation, please feel free to send an email or message to the committee clerk about the process. With the concurrence of the committee, I will call a 5-minute break near the midpoint of the meeting. However, if the 3-hour clock will continue to run. Does anyone oppose having a break? Okay. Ministry officials may be present and at the direction of the minister may address the committee. Ministry officials seated in the gallery, if called upon, have access to the microphone in the gallery area and are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Pages are available to deliver notes or other materials between the gallery and the table. Attendees in the gallery may not approach the table. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all time. If debate is exhausted prior to 3 hours, the Ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the schedule, and committee will adjourn. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise, and individual speaking times will be paused. However, the speaking block time and 3-hour meeting clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the Minister in the Assembly for the benefit of all members. The vote on estimates and any amendments will occur in Committee of Supply on March 21st, 2022. Amendments must be in writing and approved by Parliamentary Council prior to the meeting, at which time they are to be moved. The original amendment to be deposited with the committee clerk with 20 hard copies. An electronic version of the signed original should be provided to the committee clerk for distribution to the committee members. Finally, the committee should have the opportunity to hear both questions and answers without interruption during estimate debate. Debate flows through the chair at all times, including instances when speaking time is shared. And I'm going to emphasize that, please, everyone. Debate flows through the chair. And I would like to now invite the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General to begin his opening remarks. Minister, you have 10 minutes.
Great. Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I'll begin by just acknowledging that we continue as a government to respond to and recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And as well, that includes the economic challenges that came with it. And our government is focused, continues to be focused on what matters most, lives and livelihoods. And so what that means for the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General is that we need to continue to make sure that families in Alberta and communities are safe and secure, and to continue focusing on access to justice for Albertans. Now, COVID presented significant challenges to the justice system, but it also presented an opportunity to help modernize programs that are using technology to speed up the access that Albertans need to the justice system. In particular, we're moving towards modern digital solutions to better serve Albertans. And this budget continues to focus on the core priorities of Albertans and our justice system partners through these changes. We're investing in courts, in law enforcement and corrections to integrate services, adopt new approaches to persistent challenges, and ultimately, this will provide the province with better outcomes and results. We are doing all of this because we have heard from Albertans, including those in at-risk communities, that enhancing access to justice is needed now more than ever to protect Albertans and to keep all of our communities safe. Now, as I alluded to earlier, in this budget, we remain focused on improving core services for Albertans and addressing concerns within the justice system. This year, the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General's consolidated budget is $1.48 billion. Looking at the public safety side of the department, all Albertans deserve access to timely and responsive police services, no matter where they live here in Alberta. And I see no reason why someone who's living in a rural community has to wait significantly longer for police than someone who's living in Calgary or Edmonton. And that's why we're maintaining or increasing enforcement funding across the board. Funding for organized and serious crime, and this includes the alert teams, the Alberta Law Enforcement Response Teams, as I said, as it's better known as alert, is increasing to $50.4 million. Total funding for Alberta RCMP is increasing so that more officers can be hired through the police funding model and to address the RCMP's collective bargaining pay raise. Provincial funding to municipalities for policing is holding steady. In total, we are committing more than $600 million to policing and enforcement activities this year. And this is because we recognize the essential role that law enforcement officers play in protecting our communities. And we remain united in this purpose. Moving on to corrections funding and cost pressures there. In our efforts to focus on core services, we're also exploring efficiencies in the delivery of correctional services to reduce costs. What this means is, first, increase in the use of technology to streamline administration and supervision to create efficiencies there. Second, internalizing some services that were once contracted out at a higher cost An example would be the youth community corrections in Calgary. Third, finding and eliminating duplication wherever it's possible. Fourth, managing and filling vacancies strategically. Next, reducing costs through group purchasing and sharing contracts with other government branches. And last, analyzing the use of our resources and overtime within our correctional centres. Next, moving on to the court system funding, we're focusing on core services and changing the way that we do business. We know that Alberta's courts strive to resolve matters in a timely way. My department has been working with Alberta's judiciary to modernize court services and operations, work that was sped up by the need to address pressures that were created by the pandemic, including court closures and physical distancing requirements. Now, thankfully, staff and our partners were able to expand the use of remote court hearings faster than expected, and this freed up invaluable court space and time. And through the Justice Digital Initiative, we're also using technology and process changes to make similar improvements in other areas of the justice system. Services for traffic tickets, adjournments, filings, case management, and virtual courts are getting more user-friendly and efficient, and this is thanks to the increased use of technology and process updates. The value benefits from practical changes like this start to add up quickly when we look at the big picture, so we'll be continuing down this road in 2022 as well. And I'm excited to discuss more about the Justice Digital Initiative and some of the other exciting next steps in our modernization efforts in the months to come, such as new digital tools for our courtroom clerks, for them to be able to boost productivity, for them to be able to create efficiencies for both pre and post courtroom operations, as well as during hearings. And my officials will be prepared to go into more details in our discussion today. In conclusion, as you see, we're leaving no option unexplored as we work to improve, to provide, I should say, Albertans with an efficient and effective justice system. And this budget also prioritizes delivering better value and services for taxpayer dollars. And throughout all this work, we remain laser focused on protecting lives and livelihoods. The results speak for themselves. Albertans will have a justice system that is more modern and more user-friendly. They'll also have correctional facilities properly staffed. They will see more enforcement officers in uniform protecting their families and their communities. And in short, they will have a system built for the times that we live in and optimized to make the best use of precious public resources. Budget 22 reflects this government's commitment to keeping Albertans safe and secure wherever they call home in our province. Madam Chair, that's it for my comments. Please to take questions from the committee. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. We will have our break after our independent member finishes up his questions with the Minister. I hear there'll be fresh coffee for us then. So with that, we'll move over now for the next 60 minutes to the members of the official opposition and the Minister. Honourable members, you will be able to see the timer for the speaking block just on either of these big screens here. And so, members, would you like to combine your time with the Minister?
I probably block time.
Block time first? Okay, that's your preference. All right, please proceed.
Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here to discuss Justice and Solicitor General estimates. And thank you, Minister, for being here today. And thank you to all your staff for being here and available to answer these questions and for the work you do year-round to keep Albertans safe. I do have a fair bit of questions, so I will get right into it. My first set of questions relate to Ministry's business plan. On page 75 of business plan, it states, and I quote, Justice and Solicitor General helps ensure that all Albertans can live in safe, resilient communities while having access to a fair and innovative justice system where the rule of law is upheld and the government undertakings are administered according to the law. Minister, as of late, we have been hearing about attacks on racialized women, in particular Black Muslim hijab-wearing women across this province. In Beltline, Calgary, there are daily protests against the public health restriction, which some will argue that have already been lifted. And then Alberta goods border crossing remained blocked illegally for 22 days. So the question I have is that what you have to say to those who are just being attacked for who they are, and to those who are feeling less safe because of these attacks, and what you have to say to the residents of Calgary Beltline who are inconvenienced by the anti-public health restrictions, those fringe groups, and then what you have to say to those who lost millions and were unable to get to funerals of their loved one and had to miss important appointment because of the 22-day-long unlawful and illegal blockade. So I guess what I'm asking here is that are you satisfied with the state of rule of law? And if not, what you intend to do differently to uphold the rule of law and fulfill government responsibility to uphold the rule of law? Second question relates to page 75 of the business plan. It says that the ministry program and services help ensure Alberta's security and access to justice through efficient functioning of courts, correction, and law enforcement. However, there are currently more than 3,000 cases in provincial court alone at risk of being tossed out over unreasonable delay. These are cases beyond the 18-month threshold as of December 31st, 2021. That's according to the Alberta Crown Attorneys Association. So I have a few questions relating to this, and in your opening remarks, Minister, you talked about access to justice. A week ago, you told Mayor of Hudson that we don't have any Jordan situation right now. So the first question I will ask, do you think these numbers are correct, what Alberta's Crown Attorney Association is saying? There are 3,000 cases in provincial court alone. Second question is that it's a deeply concerning situation, and I want to ask that what message you have for all those who are wronged by criminal acts and are not seeing their perpetrators get the punishment. They are not seeing the justice system work for them. And why is that they didn't get access to justice, they didn't have their day in court? And what message do you have for these victims of crime? Another question that I would like to ask you about the status of Jordan delays overall and share what you intend to do to address this situation. Another question, the legal aid budget is also cut by $300,000 this year, line item 5.5. How does that help to ensure Albertans' access to justice? And how many cases are there beyond the 18-month threshold as of today? And I'm not talking about Jordan applications being made to the court. I'm talking about the actual number of cases that are beyond 18-month threshold. Then I also want to know how many cases are there beyond the 30-month threshold as of today. And again, I'm not talking about the Jordan applications being made. That information is available on court's website. So just the number of cases that are beyond 30-month threshold as of today. And through chair, also want to talk about AG's Auditor General's recommendation, page 227 of the fiscal plan. Auditor General recommendation is the heading is continue cause analysis of cases delayed due to Jordan application. And Auditor General recommends that the department continue its cause analysis of cases which have been judicially stayed or preemptively stayed by Alberta Crown Prosecution Service because of Jordan application to identify contributing shortcomings in practice or behavior it can control or correct. The department has accepted this recommendation, and I think it's important that we have that information. We know the cause of these delays, and the question I have is, Where is that work at? It's already March 2022. And will you be sharing that analysis publicly? And if not, why not? Back to business plan, page 75. Ministry supports victim service providers that help victims of crime, including those affected by domestic violence, hate-motivated crimes, and human trafficking. Second paragraph towards the bottom. The question I have is that your government has made cuts to the victim of crime funds. My colleagues and I have been hearing from organizations and victims for the last 2 years now. The new program is still not in place, and the changes that were made by your government are not acceptable. So why is your government taking those essential and needed supports from those victims of crime? Page 76 of the business plan. The ministry is examining the current victim service delivery model to ensure services are consistent and accessible and provide the appropriate support to victims of crime. Again, what's the status? How long more victims will have to wait? Page 79 of business plan, expense statement that shows that victim of crime and public safety will see a reduction from 69 million to 62 million. Why is that, and can you explain that reduction? And other question I have is that how much money from the victim of crime fund will go to fund other services this year? Back to page 75 of business plan through you, Chair. The ministry provides critical services. Those services are listed there. And then the government strategic plan, page 135, says that the increase in operating expense of 99 million is mainly due to RCMP collective agreement costs and increased costs for Alberta Sheriff and Correctional Services. So the question I have is that this budget has not added any new money for program and services, which were deeply impacted by the cuts in previous year. And last year alone, this ministry was cut by 65 million. Considering Jordan delays and law and order pressures, can you assure Albertans that despite these massive cuts in last few years, the ministry program and services will not be impacted by these cuts, and in the given budget, the ministry will be able to deliver on its mandate? And also, another related question is that from this increase of 99 million, what amount exactly is going to cover the cost of collective agreements, and what amount will go towards other programs and services? Page 75 of the business plan. The ministry is committed to reducing rural crimes, and the violent rural crime stats on page 77 shows that there is an upward trend. Why is it going up despite the UCP rhetoric and efforts? Are there new and dedicated funds to tackle it? I think another related question is that where do Edmonton, Calgary, and Lethbridge stand on crime severity index, and what you will do to reduce that? I will leave it at that.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. And we'll turn the time now over to the Minister for his response.
Great. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you to the member for the questions. I hope that I wrote down the questions exhaustively and have an opportunity to answer them. If not, then please do remind me if there was anything that I missed. So first, I'll begin with the questions related to hate crimes, because I think that that was the first question. Well, it was raised as an issue. Most of the questions were related to the Beltline protests, but I'll just maybe begin by speaking a little bit about hate crimes or hate-motivated crimes, because they fall broadly into two different categories. There's the traditional crimes like mischief to property that include a hate element, and these are offenses that are charged and prosecuted according to the relevant criminal code section, and that the hate element of the crime is only taken into consideration at the time of sentencing. There's also the second category of hate propaganda, or also known as hate speech, and these offenses are charged and prosecuted under sections 318 and 319, I think, of the Criminal Code. So the newly created Hate Crimes Coordination Unit is falling under the Intelligence Bureau within the Public Security Division. And the added cost in establishing this unit, the HCCU, is estimated to be about $600,000 annually. Now, the HCCU is mandated to deliver services which would reduce, respond to, and promote recovery from a hate-themed occurrence throughout Alberta. And the members of the unit will provide situational awareness and advice to officials in JSG, and as well as the AACP, the Association, or the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police, on hate-motivated incidents, and to develop interagency intelligence and criminal analysis to support those investigations, and prevention programming as well, because it's not just about enforcement, but it's also about prevention. And so they'll be collaborating with the minister-appointed community liaisons on hate crimes and diverse community and stakeholder organizations, such as the Alberta Hate Crime Committee, the AHCC, to support an environment that actively addresses issues of bias, as well as prejudice and hate. And amid the rising concerns, Madam Chair, about hate-motivated violence, which the member correctly points out, and vandalism across the province, the Alberta Security Infrastructure Program officially launched this fall. Not-for-profit organizations can now apply for grants to assist in applying security in and around their premises. And the HCCU is supporting the administration of the ASIP grants. So I would say that in general, related to hate crimes, as well as just to point out that we are taking a holistic approach to fighting hate crime in the province, and working to support the vulnerable and bring justice to those who would prey on these vulnerable populations in our province. The member then spoke about the Beltline protests and concerns that folks have related to those protests. I would say, first of all, as I said in the House earlier this week, that when it comes to decisions related to police operations, municipal police services like the one in Calgary, as a former member of the Calgary Police Commission, they are accountable to the Calgary Police Commission. And I know that I was asked in the House about some of the members of council in Calgary who have raised concerns publicly about that, and I think at least one of them is a member of the Calgary Police Commission. So there's an opportunity for us, because we do have in these municipal police services under the Police Act, if they fall under the Police Act here in Alberta, there's opportunities for us to have civilian-led oversight of police performance, civilian-led governance regarding policies for our police services, like the one in Calgary. And there's opportunities then for us as a citizen. Like the member, Madam Chair, live in Calgary, and so there's an opportunity for me, for him, for others in the Beltline who would have concerns about protests, about not feeling safe, to be able to speak to and advocate with the Calgary Police Commission, or through their council members, because the Calgary Police Commission is accountable to the Calgary City Council, to be able to speak to them about their concerns and make sure that those concerns are then being addressed through the governance and oversight that the Calgary Police Commission has over the Calgary Police Service. And that's the structure that we have for the governance and oversight that we as civilians have over policing operations for those police services that fall under the Police Act. That's the structure that we have as citizens, to have that accountability for police operations. We do not, as politicians, direct law enforcement operations. We don't, and I've heard from, not from the member, but from some of his colleagues in the House, calls for there to have been political intervention regarding police operations. I think we have to be prudent. I think we have to be deferential to law enforcement. We want to make sure that all those folks, the member, Madam Chair, had raised tangentially the issue at the Coots border crossing. I'd say this, that we want to make sure that those law enforcement officers who are involved in a situation like the Coots border crossing are coming home to their families safe every night. That means that the work that our law enforcement is doing, I think we have to give deference to that, making sure that it's done in a safe way that deals with those who are going to be breaking the law, People have the right to protest in this province, and we respect that, but it has to be done in a lawful way. There was unlawful activity that occurred at the Coutts border crossing. Thank you to the law enforcement officers that addressed it. I can understand the frustration that Albertans might have had if they didn't think that it was happening fast enough. But we also have to make sure that we give deference and we act prudently and support those law enforcement agencies, because it's a multi-agency response, making sure that those officers are coming home safe to their families every night. We're not being pushed politically into a situation where their lives may have been at risk. I think after that question, we then had questions related to Jordan. Oh, sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Minister. And I guess I'd first point out that we have to remember that as we see cases that might be over a certain period of time, waiting for the disposition of whatever the situation might be for the accused, that the Jordan does separate between what is and isn't within the control of the Crown. So we were asked about a certain number of cases that might be over the 30-month limit. Before I defer to an official to be able to answer that question, I think we have to make sure that we also are distinguishing, though, between those that are and are not within the control of the Crown. And the court has, in a number of circumstances, made a determination that, and second, I would point out that it's also a difference between the applications and the situations where the court has agreed with the applicant regarding the Jordan application. I'd also say that, and I think in that question, Madam Chair, the member is correct in saying, because I think the underlying concern is that Albertans deserve a justice system which protects them. It protects their loved ones, protects their property, and we need to be committed to providing the tools and the resources that are necessary to ensure that the criminal justice system here in Alberta operates in a timely and effective way. So government is spending $10 million to hire 50 new prosecutors and support staff to increase the proper functioning of the criminal justice system here in the province. Since budget year 2020-21, there have been 40 new prosecutors hired, and work to hire their, and we are working to hire the remaining 10, and support staff is underway. And this increase will also ensure that rural Albertans are better served by the justice system by prioritizing placing the new students in locations. Sorry, because we are recruiting, I forgot, I'm sorry, jumping over this point, that we increase the number of articling students from 8 to 20 to help recruit lawyers to ultimately work as Crown prosecutors, and making sure that they're not just working in Edmonton and Calgary. And all of our stakeholders in law enforcement, the judiciary, duty council, Crown prosecutors, continue to work together to identify further improvements to help decrease delay. So some of the recent changes include using the remote court processes to help address the backlogs and shorten wait times, remotely hearing thousands of dockets, hearings, trials, sentencings, and other situations, encouraging Albertans to deal with their traffic tickets online, starting email filing as well of certain documents, and work on a more permanent e-filing solution for the province, moving jury selection and jury trials to off-site facilities that are better able.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Minister. We are going to turn the time back over to the official opposition. Please proceed, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Chair. There were quite a few questions, Minister, that I didn't hear any answers to. But anyway, moving on to page 75 of business plan. Talks about hate crime unit and introduction of specialized training for key justice system officials. So question I have that can you share more about information, share more about the training, who developed it, how it was developed, and what percentage of justice staff has already been trained in it. Page 76 of the business plan talks about the new and innovative approach to policing. And on page 77, outcome 1 talks about collaboration with policing partners and review of police services. So there was a resolution passed at the Alberta Municipalities Convention a week ago, I believe March 9th, and a position paper was also issued outlining their official position, dated March 9th, essentially saying that municipalities across Alberta do not support the idea of provincial policing. Then on March 15, 2 days ago, the rural municipalities of Alberta, they voted 67% in favor of reinforcing their support for the RCMP and calling on government to not pursue a provincial police force. And the PricewaterhouseCoopers LLP's report, Alberta Provincial Police Force Transition Study, clearly identifies additional costs of $200 million per year in federal funding lost, and then $366 million in transitional costs alone. That's on top of what the UCP has already downloaded onto municipalities through their new provincial policing model to the tune of $286 million. And further, the report by Fair Deal panel indicated that this was unpopular with Albertans. So simple question, Minister, why is this government still insisting to move ahead with the idea of provincial police force? And what will it take for the government to listen and to abandon this idea? And do these resolutions from municipal partners mean anything to this government? Back to page 76 of the business plan. Talks about reviewing the programs and services that this department delivers. So question I have is, what programs specifically are under review at this point? And will the public have any opportunity for input in those reviews? And also, will those reviews, any information from those reviews, will be made public? And also, while talking about reviews, and I understand that reviewing program is important, and we have heard from many about concerns around systemic racism and instances where public trust and confidence in our police services is undermined. So are you reviewing any program, like, for instance, police education and training? Or you have any steps in mind that you will take to ensure that Albertans have the trust and confidence in their law enforcement? And page 77 talks about outcome 2, implementing the Fair Deal panel recommendation to make Alberta justice system fair and effective. The question I have is that Alberta's Anti-Racism Council made 11 recommendations for justice system on January 10, 2021. And government is yet to even say whether they accept those recommendations or not. So the first question I have is whether you accept those recommendations, and do you plan to implement, for instance, race-based data collection, or stipulate in Police Act that law enforcement officer will take an ongoing anti-racism training, those recommendations. There are 11 of them. So the first question is whether you accept them, and the second is whether you will enact any of that, and in particular collection of race-based data. Question around outcome 2, page 77. It talks about Recall Act. So the question I have is that why has the government not proclaimed the regulations yet? What's the delay? Page 78, 2A performance measure, talks about lead time to trial for serious and violent matters, and it shows that it has increased during the COVID, and might I suggest that due to the cuts over the last 3 years. So the question I have is what specific steps you intend to take to bring that lead time down. And if there are new investments in your budget, that will help us achieve that goal. Performance indicator 2B shows that Indigenous Albertans are overrepresented in correctional center. In last 2 years, that situation has even gone worse. So again, the question is what specific steps you intend to take to bring down the overrepresentation of Indigenous people in our justice system. With respect to statement of revenue, page 79, it's projecting premiums, fees and licenses revenue to go up from 25 million to 33 million in 2022-2023. So the question I have is that what fees or premiums Albertans should expect to increase this year? And can you please provide a breakdown for us where those increases are coming from? Statement of revenues, page 79, is projecting other revenues to go up from 52 million to 64 million this year. Can you explain where those other revenues are coming from? Under capital investment, page 79 of business plan, Alberta Crown Prosecution Services are seeing an increase. I would like to know what projects are considered there in that increase. Page 77 of business plan, outcome 2, a fair and effective justice system. And again, key objective there talks about recall legislation, UCP's fair deal panel, and I would suggest that none of those reflect issues facing Albertans, in particular Black, Indigenous, and person of color communities who have issues around systemic racism, issues around overrepresentation of Indigenous and Black people in the justice system. So help me understand how things you have listed there help us address these concerns. Page 78, outcome 3, introduces a new model of victim service delivery. And it's exactly the same as last year. So as I said earlier, that my colleagues and I are hearing about victims getting refused for services. So can you commit to a timeline that when we can expect a new model will be in place, when the new program will be in place, and how long do victims have to wait? A few questions relating to fiscal plan 2022-25. It doesn't mention even the word racism. Why is that? Don't you see that as an issue? And page 133 of fiscal plan talks about a human trafficking working group led by Justice and Solicitor General. Can you tell us what's the progress there, and will there be some report that will be shared publicly? Page 135 of fiscal plan, I asked this already, that there was a $99 million increase mainly for collective agreements. So I wanted to know that how much exactly is going to those agreements and how much is going to services. And then there is...
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. Now we'll return back over to the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member. Thank you for these questions. They're incredibly thoughtful and substantive questions, so really appreciate being able to speak about all these things. I'll maybe just begin with maybe one thing that I didn't get to in the last block was related to the Victims of Crime Fund. It is not actually being cut. The Victims of Crime Fund is not being cut. There are the scope of the fund actually was expanded so that there is more opportunities for us to use the Victims of Crime Fund for also public safety initiatives as well. But just to make sure that was clarified. Related to legal aid, because that was asked in the last block, we do remain committed to helping those in Alberta who are vulnerable to be able to access justice services that they need by continuing to provide steady funding to legal aid in Budget 22. And while we are maintaining funding at the same level as last year, this represents an almost 70% increase in legal aid funding that has occurred since 2014. And with the pressures of the pandemic easing in 2022, we will reassess the funding for Legal Aid Alberta as needed as more court locations open up again. Next, I'll move on to the question related to the Indigenous Justice Program. This module-based training is being developed in collaboration with Native Counseling Services of Alberta. I think that was the question the member had. It will be available for our two Alberta's justice system professionals. Alberta received about $203,000 from Justice Canada to develop this training. In addition, all government employees will be taking unconscious bias training over the coming year as well. Next, I think the member was asking about the work that's been done to investigate whether there could or should be an Alberta Provincial Police Service. And first of all, I just want to say, because I think the member, I wrote down this quote, why is this government still insisting on proceeding with this? I just want to clarify that that's not the case at all, Madam Chair. There has been no decision regarding an Alberta Provincial Police. We are still engaging with Albertans through the work that is happening after and as a result of the PwC report. And I've heard loud and clear from municipal leaders that they had concerns about the scope of the engagement. I've committed to them in being able to sit down with them and hear their concerns about whether or why an Alberta Provincial Police should be the case. But whether or not we have an Alberta Provincial Police Service, I think it's time that we have to acknowledge some of the ways in which the MPSAs, the Municipal Police Service agreements that 47 of our municipalities have with the federal government to provide police services through the RCMP, with the RCMP being the vendor providing contract policing. And the way that we, through our PPSA, the Provincial Police Service Agreement, engage and contract out with the federal government to have the RCMP providing a provincial police has a number of concerns. And so whether or not we have an Alberta Provincial Police Service, we have to acknowledge the ways in which policing right now is not serving in particular rural Albertans very well. One of the concerns that I have is that we don't have local police commissions throughout the province for all of these municipalities, and to have an opportunity for policies to be set by local commissions rather than by national policies across the country, to have local evaluation of police performance, that we need to move forward in allowing civilian-led selection of detachment commanders. We have to move forward in allowing or improving recruitment throughout the province to focus on those who value rural life and desire to live and work in rural Alberta, to reduce the frequency of transitions that we see throughout the province, to reduce the limited duration postings, to stop the transfer promotion so that people don't have to transfer out of a community just to be able to progress in their career, that we have to improve training in the province so that we have training in Alberta, not just elsewhere in the country, that we can have training that focuses on community policing, that we have training that focuses on specific Alberta Indigenous communities, that we have improved information sharing so that PROS, is integrated with every police service, and that we have an integrated approach to data sharing to end the duplication, that we can see an opportunity for us to speed up forensics. Instead of having triaging that's on a national basis, that we could actually have provincially tiered forensics in the province. And that we can also move forward in improving dispatch by expanding the RTOC to work with all municipal and First Nations. And we don't see that right now. So whether or not we have an APP or not, we have to be able to resolve these issues. And we need to work with our municipal leaders to understanding that these are concerns, that these are issues, and that we can all work together to addressing them. The member then, I think, asked about systemic racism, Madam Chair, and concerns I would say that we do have an opportunity through the work that's been done so far on the Police Act review. I think that there are opportunities in that review for us to be able to improve the complaints process for, at least for those police services that fall under the Police Act, so that we can, right now as a former member of a police commission, right now the complaints process for a complainant, complaints can take many, many years to resolve, which is frustrating for a lot of complainants. So I think there's ways in which we can take the feedback we've received from communities throughout the province to improve the Police Act so that it's more responsive, and in particular to those who have concerns about systemic racism. The Recall Act was a concern that was also raised by the member. That did receive royal assent on in June of 21. It has not yet, as the member pointed out, Madam Chair, been proclaimed. That proclamation will be a key, it's a key commitment, key platform commitment. Right now, before we do proclaim the Act, there is a need first for us to develop the regulation that's required to support the Act before it does come into force. So work is still underway in developing that regulation so that it can be proclaimed. I'm hoping that this work can be completed fairly soon so that the regulation can and that the Act can be come into force and be proclaimed as soon as that. Well, actually, not as soon as, because I think in a consultation with the Chief Electoral Officer as well, we understand there is a period of time that the Chief Electoral Officer would then need to stand up processes and policies and guides to support the recall process. I understand that it might be a couple of weeks for his office to be able to do that, but soon after the regulations are developed and completed, and then that period of time for Mr. Resler's office to finish that work to develop those processes, then it would be able to come into force at that time. We were asked about fees and premiums. I can say, Madam Chair, that there is going to be no increase in any fees and any premiums. Any increase that's reflected in the budget is an increase in volume, but not in any of the fees and not in any of the not in any of the premiums. $4.6 million increase for the victims of crime and public safety surcharges is due to a 5% hike in the provincial victims of crime and public safety fund fine surcharge to support the public safety initiatives. $2.5 million increase for the late penalties, and a $2.1 million increase for ticket processing due to increased provincial fine retention, but no increases in any of these fines, fees, or premiums, Madam Chair. I would say as well, the Anti-Racism Council, I think we were asked about that and the recommendations that we received. And I can say that we have been focusing on our own hate crimes initiatives. The recommendations from that council are now continuing to still be analyzed. But right now we are focusing on our own hate crimes initiatives at this time, Madam Chair. And I believe I may be fairly close to time, so happy to go back to my colleagues for further questions.
Thank you so much, Minister. And back to the Honourable Member.
Thank you, and I will just follow up on a couple of questions. So page 79, Statement of Revenues, is clearly projecting that revenues from fine is going up. So there will be some new fees, new fines, and that's the reason that they're going up. With respect to the question around Anti-Racism Council's recommendation, they're all really good, and the question I specifically asked was about the collection of race-based data. And reason I asked that is that's important for many reasons. We do know that Black, Indigenous, and person of color communities. They are overrepresented in our justice system, and having that data is important to ensure a fair and efficient justice system. Anyway, I will move on to page 135 of the fiscal plan. There is funding increase of $5 million for Alberta Security Infrastructure Program to address hate and bias motivated incidents, which is really good, and I recognize that this funding is important. But my concern is that the attacks I talked about on individual Albertans, in particular hijab-wearing Muslim Albertans, they occurred on the streets, on the bus stations, on parking lots. So is there any money that will be earmarked to address those attacks specifically? And in order to address those, I would suggest that it's important that Ministry analyze these recommendations from Alberta's Anti-Racism Council and clear their position whether they are accepting those recommendations and set out some time frame to address and implement those recommendations. Page 214 of fiscal plan, schedule 24, expense by object. It provides a breakdown of ministry's expenses, and I was looking at this: salaries and wages, 756 million, supplies and services 459, grants to other 253 million. So the total doesn't add up to 1481, it adds up to 1480. There is a little bit discrepancy there, but I wanted to ask about a detailed breakdown of the grants, that's $253 million number. Then I have a question around Auditor General's recommendation. It's on page 227 of the fiscal plan. And I think it relates to line item 4.1 as well. Auditor General is recommending that department resume its bail result analysis and evaluate and report on effectiveness of implemented solutions. And we recommend that Department of Justice and Solicitor General resume its detailed results analysis of the various steps in the bail hearing process, evaluate and report on effectiveness of solution it implements to improve identified problem in the bail hearing process. The department accepted this recommendation, but they said they intend to continue providing this analysis as long as resources allow. So the question I have is, will there be resources? Have you budgeted for this? And it's important that we take these recommendations seriously. And bail process itself, it's important, people's liberties at stake, that we have that in place, and I hope that there are resources and you can address this question. The second recommendation relates to triage process protocol, its tracking and reporting requirements, and recommendation is to ensure that tracking and reporting requirement of triage protocol are followed by all Crown Prosecution Service offices. Department said that they will conduct a review and implement it by March 2022. So the question I have is it done? Has it been implemented? And will that be made public? If somebody wants to see it, can you share where they can find that information? Page 228, a fiscal plan. It talks about victim of crime and safety funds. And there is a recommendation that is repeated by Auditor General. So clearly it was not implemented. And they're recommending again, develop and approve a business plan with measurable desired results for the victim of crime and public safety fund, and publicly report the result of this business plan. So the question I have is, why was there a delay? Why was it not implemented? And why Auditor General have to say the same thing over and over? And I have asked about victim of crime funds as well. So the question I have is, will the minister be able to share a timeline when that recommendation will be fully implemented? Page 212 of this year fiscal plan. Less full-time equivalents at 6592 for 21-22 and 6605 for 22-23. However, the last year fiscal plan, page 182, Justice and Solicitor General had 6,670 full-time equivalents in the previous year and 6,599 full-time equivalent in 2021-2022. So there is a reduction of 71 employees in last year or so. But this year number somehow shows that 13 people are added. But clearly there was a reduction of employees from 2021 to this budget, 71 employees. So I would like to know what positions were cut over the last 1 year or so. Then I have a couple of questions with respect to JSG, Justice and Solicitor General Entity Financial Information 2022-23, page 80, transfers from Canada, 10 million increases projected, if you can provide a bit of detail for that. Again, fine and penalties, revenue forecast is from 231 million. It's estimated to be 271 million. Again, there are some fines, some penalties that are increased. So what are those new fines and penalties? And same page 80, in expense, victim of crime and public safety, estimated 62 million, same as last year. Again, I need a breakdown that what amount of that fund is going directly to support the victim of crime, not the public safety initiatives. And with respect to strategic plan, page 11, they're dedicating up to 49 million in 2022 in number of initiatives. I just want to ask, is that a highlight or a new funding?
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. And now we'll turn the time back over to the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member. I think the first question was, again, a question about the fine revenue. And I would say that we have seen over the last couple of years, perhaps because of the pandemic, we have seen fine revenue going down over the last few years. So we do see a bump, or we're expecting a bump. We're budgeting for a bump. And the reason for that is just that we expect the volume to go up from what we've seen in what's come down over the last couple of years during the pandemic. The next question is about race-based data. And for this, you could? Okay. I'd ask for Assistant Deputy Minister Cooley to come and speak about the work that's underway with the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police and Stats Can. So
Thank you, Minister. So I think it's fair to say that police services in Alberta understand the importance of collecting race-based data. It's been discussed at the Alberta Association of Chiefs of Police meetings, and they acknowledge the work that's being done. Right now, the Canadian Association of Chiefs of Police and Statistics Canada are working on a national data collection framework. So we've deferred our work to allow CACP and StatsCan to do their work so that we get a national picture and we're comparable with other jurisdictions.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I think next was related to the Alberta Security Infrastructure Program and questions related to what else might be done for Albertans, the point being that some of the crimes against a vulnerable Albertan might not necessarily be in a facility like a place of worship or a community center, et cetera, but it might be on the street, I think is the point that the member made. First, before I speak specifically to that, I just further about the ASIP program. And because we have seen hate-motivated crimes when it comes to synagogues, cemeteries, community centers and schools related to the Islamic faith, and then fire bombings, including the Vietnamese church in Calgary recently. And so really pleased to support the continued work for us to and actually more than doubling the funds so that we can increase the opportunities for these vulnerable populations to support and protect these facilities related to that population. For somebody who is a vulnerable person and not at one of these facilities, I would point out to the work that the hate crimes liaisons are doing now, and the answers that I gave previously related to hate crimes and what we are doing with the hate crimes coordination unit and the liaisons to be able to address the ways in which we as a province can support the work and coordinate the work throughout the province and try to help police services throughout the province address these concerns so that everybody in the province, no matter who they are, where they came from, where they were born, the color of the skin, feel safe in their community. Next, sorry, I didn't catch this one. I didn't speak to you about this one.
No, this is 253.
All right, thank you.
Good morning, Brad Smith, Assistant Deputy Minister, Financial Services. Through the chair, there was a question related to the breakdown of object of expenditures in the fiscal plan. I believe the reference was to page 214. And so of the $1.481 billion, $756 million of that is salary, wages, and benefits, so it reflects a heavy frontline operating ministry. $451 million of total operational expense budgeted for supplies and services, and that includes $343 million for the Provincial Police Services Agreement. There's $253 million, or 17% of the total, related to grants, which includes $89 million for police assistance grants to municipalities, $94 million for legal aid. There's $6 million budgeted for amortization of capital assets, and $6 million in an other category, which is effectively a write-down of assets. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Assistant Deputy Minister Smith. Next was a question related to a recommendation from the Auditor General, and this relates to, I think the member had said, Madam Chair, relates to line 4.1. The question was whether the recommendation was for us to continue to resume that work, and will there continue to be resources, and do we take the recommendation seriously? And so for that answer, I will defer this to Deputy Minister.
Thank you, Minister. Good morning.
And thank you for the question, Frank Bosca, Deputy Minister, Justice and Solicitor General. We do very much take the recommendation seriously, and we have devoted resources to this. The reason for the inclusion of while resources are available was included because it does involve frontline prosecutors to make sure that we're getting the right information. There are concerns at times that we have to prioritize what's going on in court versus where we're trying to get the metrics. We do take it seriously. We fully expect that with the hiring of the additional prosecutors over the last couple of years, we'll be able to maintain collecting that data and having it available. In terms of the report, we fully expect that it will be completed, or this review that we're doing, by the end of this month, once we've had a chance to review it, and we will look at the implementation to continue to improve on these services. Whether it will be made public or not will be something we'll have to consider given the nature of prosecutions and their operations. There's a lot of restrictions that we have to be mindful of before we make things public. But thank you for the question.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, next was a question about the Crown Prosecution Services and the review that was to be done by March 22. And again, I will ask Deputy Minister to be able to speak to. Oh, sorry, was that the one?
Well, that was the one.
Well, you already spoke.
Yes.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Next was a question about the business plan for the Victims of Crime Fund, which was a recommendation as well. And I can advise, yes, we do accept the recommendation. It's just a matter of timing related to this, the development of this business plan. And so for that, is it right to impose on Assistant Deputy Minister Cooley?
Thanks. So as the Minister indicated, Madam Chair, that the department certainly accepts the recommendation, but the issue now is we're right in the middle of redeveloping the Victims of Crime package. So we, as we've talked to the auditor's office, we've let them know that we accept the recommendation. Once we get the new Victims of Crime package together, we will then be in a better position to establish the business plan. So that should be coming within the next several months.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, I think the next question was related to the FTEs and for the number of FTEs in this budget. Deputy Minister, I will again defer to you for this answer.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, so the department has gone through a number of adjustments over the last few years with respect to living within its budget. And so the reductions that we have seen reflect those reductions in staff that were based on decisions made in the 2019-2021 budgets as we went through to basically reduce the number of staff we had in certain areas. And people may recall that we had a reduction in our civil law teams, and that reflects a lot of those 71s would have come from that. There were some other positions that were abolished through in courts and in a couple of the other departments that represent the 71. The 13 increase that we have this year is primarily comprised of the transfer into our department of positions from other departments, and the increase also represents a few positions that have been created to reflect the new programs that we are offering under the department. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, we may not have too much time for the next question, but it was regarding details regarding the transfers from Canada. And Deputy Minister, if I can again.
Okay. And I'll actually ask Brian too.
Assistant Deputy Minister Smith.
Thank you. To the Chair, there was a question from the member on the transfers from Government of Canada. Yes, there's a $9.3 million increase, and that's comprised of $5.4 million from the federal government contribution for legal aid, a $2 million increase from the federal initiatives on guns and gangs due to the integrated opioid enforcement tactics requirement and crime prevention grants, a $1.6 million increase for the Corrections Exchange of Services Agreement.
Thank you so much to the Minister and his team. We'll turn the time back now over to our independent member. Is that right? Yes. Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Minister, to you and your entire staff for all the work you do for Alberta, and of course your time here today. I greatly appreciate it. Would you like to go back and forth? Would you like me to do 10 minutes a block?
If block time's okay with you, that'd be great.
Yeah,
Thank
sure,
you.
it is. I have 8 or 9 things I'd like to mention, so I'll do my best to get it in the 10 minutes. appreciated your remarks at the start. You talked a lot about access to justice for Albertans. You talked about timely access to justice, and then you had some words around accountability for the people provided in providing the access to justice and the protection of Albertans. So let me start there. Rural crime significantly spiked up in the last little while, possibly due to the pandemic, possibly due to the bad economy. And I heard some things. First of all, in rural Alberta, the lack of police services. Sometimes in two counties, 300 miles by 300 miles, there might only be one or two policemen and women working that night in duty. And of course, if you have to drive 200 miles in between calls, the timeliness of that is not there. And of course, we all know that an important incident or a call can eat up several hours and hours of time and paperwork. So is there enough resources to protect rural Albertans? I guess the next thing I've heard, where in your budget, where in your focus in your business plan are you putting time on overcoming regionalization issues? Of course, crime, if a crime happens in a city and the person runs into a county, you have a situation between where you're dealing with two different police forces, a municipal one and an RCMP one, and how does the change off happen from that? How does that work? Is that a huge problem? To be frank, Minister, it's one of the reasons a lot of people want an Alberta police force researched. And then the other two things I hear that maybe hurt me the most, I've heard the situations where our Crown prosecutors have tens and tens of files and are very, very busy. And I've heard about some property crimes, shoplifting in particular, where the store owner will phone the police and no one will come because the Crown prosecutor won't end up handling the situation, and there's nothing that can happen to the perpetrator anyway. And then when I hear, Minister, that it's quite often the same small percentage of people committing the crimes, I wonder, of course the main concern is to help these people get back to be a full contributing, member of society, and I appreciate that might be part of out of your budget, but do you have some focus on these consistent people that are breaking crimes in a small property way, and what can we do about that to really protect Albertans? Secondly, Alberta Police Force. I clearly know that when I talk to Albertans who everyday Albertans out there that need to work hard and create income and create wealth and protect their families, although they greatly appreciate the work that individual RCMP officers do and what the RCMP officers do for us, they are interested in greater protection. They are interested in gaining some level of autonomy from Ottawa, and they believe that an Alberta police force can do both, make them safer and make Alberta stronger. I don't know if it's under your jurisdiction or not, but we now have appointed our own chief firearms officer. I see no reason why the gun owners of Alberta who take out gun ownership registrations shouldn't elect that person. We believe in accountability, as you mentioned, so is it on your radar at all to come up with a system to elect our chief firearms officer? Speaking of photo radar, I'm disappointed that your government's announcement and a bill, I think it even was a few months ago, just seemed to reflect and further talk about what the previous government had done. I, like the previous opposition speaker before me, see that you've increased the revenue from fines and penalties, 50 million in 2 successive years, so you're expecting quite an increase in that. have we ever, photo radar, yeah, a person is breaking a traffic violation and we need to ensure safety happens. But I sometimes wonder if these fines and penalties are really appropriate and fair. And I wonder if we've ever looked at just putting photo radar just in school zones and playground zones, just to make it where, our children, of course, are precious, where the heightened awareness of that would do the most good. And back to my first access to justice, you mentioned, Minister, I think it was 50 more Crown prosecutors and $10 million more. When I look at Alberta Crown Prosecutor Services expense item, it stays static for the next 3 years. Can you please pinpoint me to where that taxpayer contribution is going to come from? Victims assistance model. I really just want to give a shout out here. I see your key objective 3.1. Introduce a new model of victim service delivery. Great. I'll just, from a personal standpoint, I had a break and enter personally 10 years ago, and it hit me harder than I'd expected. And the next day, a complete volunteer from Victims Assistance called me, and it was really good. And then I started to talk to some of my friends who were involved in Victims Assistance as volunteers, and God bless them for all the work they do, especially when it's a crime of personal injury or mental health. So just do what you can with Victims Assistance. As far as I'm concerned, that program should be enhanced all we can. It's good. Minister, if you could, Government of Alberta lawsuits. We've seen the Premier sued by NGOs over some environmental remarks. We've seen some other lawsuits, against the Government of Alberta. Is that in your budget anywhere? What do we spend per year on those kind of things? And what is our process for picking a legal firm to represent us? How do we do that? Analyzing use of resources. I'm glad to see you have that in your business plan a couple times. It's important. It's important to get value. One of the things that I've heard about, and I'm just going to quickly tell you, and maybe you can help. I've heard that sometimes between 30 and 40% of court cases, when they go to court, and that will be with the policeman there on duty, being paid for being there, but of course not out in the streets on the front lines where they could potentially do the most good. 30 to 40% of the time, the Crown prosecutor or the defense attorney or the person being charged will stay the proceedings, and these trials will be stayed and stayed and stayed. And of course, our hardworking police officers will be in there and end up just having to turn around. If that's accurate, is there anything we can do to make it so the taxpayer can get more value and still provide those services? I want to touch on drug trafficking just because it's so pertinent, and I heard Mr. Smith talk about some of it, and I was grateful for that. Cypress Medicine Hat and Medicine Hat, more and more we hear about the drugs being involved in our community, the untimely deaths, the small, or not even small, the property crimes that come for that. So I'd really like to hear about your focus to help people get out of that trap of a life. Before me, the NDP opposition mentioned the Recall Act. I just want to say it does surprise me that we're 200 or more days since we passed that in the legislature, and we still don't have the regulations. I get it that sometimes you proclaim a law or you have royal assent after we pass it in the legislature before the regulations come, but I would contend that it's a bit sloppy. It's not as good as it could be. The 87 of us had to vote on that law and had to debate that law without the regulations. And here we are all these 200 plus days later and still not the regulations. I would just think that possibly some money in your budget could go to make sure that we have that in front of us more often. And the last thing I'll mention, traffic tickets. I've heard about some truck drivers who get their second traffic ticket, even though it's maybe in the wrong area. It hurts their company's insurance, it hurts their job chances. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. And over to the Minister for her response.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member. So first, I'll talk about rural crime and just our commitment to protecting lives and livelihoods is a part of making sure that we're maintaining or increasing police support, grant funding for municipalities, more funding for alert, and I'll talk about that more in a little bit, and perhaps even impose on Assistant Deputy Minister DeGrand on that as well, just to give him a heads up that I'll be doing that. Funding for our RCMP is increasing, as is funding for the Rapid Response Initiative, which I'll talk a little bit more about as well. But overall, we do continue to provide more than $500 million for policing annually. And specifically when it comes to rural crime, yes, you're right that rural Alberta has been dealing with high crime rates, and especially involving property offenses, like you had yourself, and I'm sorry to hear that you were a victim of that offense. And folks are frustrated with the long response times, in particular if it's an isolated area in the province. So the province is standing up for rural Alberta by taking action to reduce the response times with, as I mentioned, the Rapid Response program. And the point of this is to deter crime with new as well, the work that was done under Minister Schweitzer to pass new legislation which was regulating the scrap metal dealers and recyclers. We've also taken steps to reinforce property rights by strengthening trespassing laws with tougher penalties for trespassers, using the RCMP crime gauge. A comparison of rural crime stats from January to December of 2019 to the same period in 21 shows a continued downward trend, with an overall drop of 14% in property crimes, including theft of motor vehicles, B&Es, thefts over and thefts under 5 persons. Crimes, however, have not seen the same drop, although the total persons crimes showed no change between 2020 and 2021. I'd also say that the RCMP provincial detachments report that in 21 compared to 19, there have been over 1,200 fewer motor vehicle thefts, over 2,700 fewer B&E incidents, and 3,800 fewer thefts under 5, which is good news. Good news for us to hear. Anyway, so I'm happy to take further questions on rural crime. I think that does highlight some of the work that we have been doing to, and I'd say the rapid response is also meant to alleviate some of the pressures that our CMP officers have by allowing the sheriffs and fish and wildlife officers to be able to help take some of the burden off of their work, and allowing our CMP officers to focus on serious incidents and to help with response times as well. Good question about regionalization issues. Fantastic question, Madam Chair, and through you to the member, because the member's absolutely right. Crime doesn't respect a municipal boundary. And we had, if you look at the province before 2006, we had really big concerns when it came to a lack of a regionalized approach to prevention and response to crimes in the province. And one of the reasons why, under, I think it was the Solicitor General at the time, was Harvey Sinenko, the development of the alert program. And through alert, we then had the opportunity to start addressing crime in a regionalized way. Now, it's true that we have an opportunity, if we did have a provincial police force, in expanding the work that alert does in a province-wide scale. We could expand the scale of alert and the amazing work that team does. And maybe to provide a little bit further information about alert, I'll impose on Assistant Deputy Minister DeGrand to talk a little bit more about how alert is looking at prevention and response to crime in a regionalized way.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, I'm Marlon DeGrand. I'm the Assistant Deputy Minister for the Public Security Division.
To speak to the minister's questions and point, Alert has seen an increase in funding and a commitment to double its resources over the course of 5 years. We're in the middle of that process right now. As a consequence of that, Alert has been engaged in dealing with the development of units across a broader stretch of Alberta. We have increased the rural footprint for Alert to include areas like Lloydminster, as well as expanded it to include things such as human trafficking initiatives, property crimes teams, scrap metal initiatives, and of course organized and serious crime. Alert is the conduit for joint forces operations in the province. Specific examples of recent success have been actually in the Medicine Hat area with the joint forces initiative between the Medicine Hat Police Service and the RCMP that is conducted there under the banner of Alert that has been highly effective in addressing some of the property crime issues that they've been facing in that area with some very recent and notable successes. Alerts also is the conduit for intelligence sharing in the province. The Criminal Intelligence Service of Alberta is constituted under Alert and is a conduit for all intel sharing across every one of the police services, the 7 independent municipals, 3 First Nation services, and the RCMP here in the province. We also, in addition to that, have their involvement in the Integrated Offender Management Initiative, which is a broader initiative that's undertaken by every major police service in the province and works closely with the Crown in identifying prolific offenders and high priority, especially property offenders, identifying them, working on means to either egress them from a lifestyle of crime or to address their criminality in the most aggressive way possible through the court systems. Alert actually is a managing part of that initiative, as are, of course, the major services. And finally, Alert's expansion is allowed it to involve every police service in the province, with the exception of Lakeshore Police Service, in directly having membership within the Alert forces, and every police service, including Lakeshore Police Service, is a part of the managing board of directors for Alert.
Thank you. Now, Madam Chair, I complimented the member's question regarding regionalization issues. I'm not going to do the same for his question about photo radar. That's not a JSG issue. I invite the member to be asking that to transportation. That is a traffic safety issue, and that is properly addressed by my colleagues in transportation. Although I would point out, though, when I was a member of the Police Commission in Calgary, the Calgary Police Service did come to the Commission, and there was a focus on, before there was photo radar in the city, that there was evidence that there was a concern regarding an intersection that might have a high fatality rate, and that proof that there was, when photo radar was implemented at an intersection, that it actually reduced fatalities in that intersection. An example might be Bow Trail heading east, where a lot of people are rushed going into to the downtown area at 33rd. There was often a lot of folks going through those red lights. Not even a stale yellow, but a red light, and a lot of head-on collisions in that intersection. And then the photo radar did show that it did reduce fatalities in that intersection. Regarding the question of this chief firearms officer, I want to first of all just use it as an opportunity to highlight the stellar appointment, and the recruitment didn't happen under me. This happened before I was the Minister of Justice and Solicitor General. But just to talk a little bit about the Chief Firearms Officer's career before coming into the CFO role, that she was a member of the Alberta Firearms Advisory Committee, the director of the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. As well, she was the secretary of Alberta Arms and Cartridge Collectors Association, the president of Military Collectors Club of Canada, and an associate professor of business at the U of C. As well, although I haven't seen it, not yet, although I would be interested to see it, I think has the largest collection of Japanese military firearms, I think, in the country. So somebody who comes to the role with a huge amount of experience, and someone who I think will be able to advocate well for all Albertans in this role. There was a question about the Recall Act. I think there was a question maybe advocating for us to have a debate on the regulations. I hope I misunderstood that. That's not the case. But the regulations will now be addressing, for example, expense limits, contribution limits, and all those operational details that were enabled in the Act, which the member knows because it was debated by all 87 members, for us to then be able to now take those operational issues and address them in the regs, which will be, as I said previously to other colleagues, that will be. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Minister. And we'll head to our coffee break now for 5 minutes. is for 20 minutes of questions from the members. Would you like to combine your time with Minister?
If he's amenable to that?
Sure.
Great. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the Minister and to your staff here today. It's a great opportunity for us to have a conversation with you and your team. I know it's been a very difficult couple of years during times of the COVID pandemic, with lots of challenges in the communities that we serve, and also with respect to the nonviolent and expected protests that sometimes accompany this. So I know it's been a challenging time. Minister, I know that justice system capacity, which includes the policing, judiciary, court, and corrective systems, and everything else that's overseen by your ministry are very fundamental to the functioning of society and the protection of Albertans. And of course, under the purview of our government here in Alberta, as in most other subnational jurisdictions, a very, very important element of a just society. However, in Budget 2022, I see that there's an inclusion of a $129 million increase to the Justice and Solicitor General budgets. While I'm sure this is extremely warranted, and I know that there's been a lot of diligence and work put into it, I'm still interested as to how these dollars will be allocated in benefit of Albertans and our justice system. So I'd be very appreciative if the Minister could explain to us why we are seeing a substantial increase and how this can be justified to all Albertans.
So you're going back and forth then for this segment? Okay, please proceed, Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member for the question. So the question was about the $129 million increase in the budget. So the increases in the budget, and I guess I could explain it this way, will help to keep Albertans safe and to increase access to justice in a number of ways. Some of these ways would include bolstering law enforcement. So, for example, we heard Assistant Deputy Minister DeGrand talk about ALERT. Another example would be the Alberta Sheriffs. Improving police accountability. So we are increasing our funding for ACERT, which is the Alberta Serious Incident Response Teams. There's significant increase in funding for ACERT for them to continue to be supported in the work that they do and to improve the accountability of police services in the province. Continuing to modernize all three levels of court that we have here in the province. So not just the provincial court and the Court of Queen's Bench, which see a lot of volume throughout the province, but also the Court of Appeal. We're also going to see increased funding for our correctional facilities, as well the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner and the office's staff. There's going to be increasing the number of staff in that office. And then more than doubling the grants, as we talked about in the questions from other colleagues, for the protection of community facilities for those who are at risk of hateful vandalism or violence. There's also going to be steady funding also to help keep Albertans safe and to continue to support access to justice across the province by maintaining policing grants. So for example, the municipal policing assistance grants, as well as the police officer grants, maintaining funding as well for our prosecution service. There's a slight increase there for them as well. And then Budget 22 reflects, through this $129 million increase that I was asked about, Madam Chair, this is reflecting government's commitment to keeping Albertans safe and secure wherever they call home in the province. So thank you to the member for the question.
The honourable member.
Great. Thank you, Minister, through the chair, and for that. And thank you. I think you've touched on some items here that I'll probably try and get a little bit more granular on as we go forward. Again, Madam Chair. Minister, I can see on page 155 of the estimates documents, under line item 7.2, that the Alberta Serious Incident Response Team, or ACERT as you referenced, will receive a 35% increase in budget. As far as I'm aware, certainly we hear of ACERT when there are any particular incidents involving them, that they investigate incidents involving police and oversee any serious allegations involving police conduct. Obviously this work's important and shows to your ministry's commitment to Outcome 1, which on page 77 of the business plan, which is first and foremost to keep Albertans safe. And we know that our trust and I guess oversight of the the policing system is certainly of great relevance and importance, and I think priority for Albertans. But maybe you can expand a little bit on some of the reasons for this increase in MARC funding, and possibly just touch on how this budget allocation will improve safety and accountability in our province.
Thank you so much, Member. Minister?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the point of the increase is to increase the investigative capacity for ACERT, and really just to bring that capacity in line with the organizational needs that they've expressed to us. And that will help to address the operational pressures of the unit and the existing backlog of work at ACERT that they've advised us of. As well, the ministry recently went through a reorganization, and as a result of that reorganization, several of the units within the law enforcement and oversight branch were moved to a newly created branch, the Provincial Security and Intelligence Office. And so that's resulted in the splitting of the budget line between branches, but in reality there was, but really the increase for ACERT was to deal with increasing their capacity.
Thank you so much, Minister. Honourable Member?
Great. Thank you again to the Minister through the Chair. Minister, I'm looking over the main budget documents here and noting a significant increase in line 8 on page 156. You again reference the overall corrections budget and see that it's increased by over 22 million this year, a jump of about 7%, so greater than inflation and probably population growth. Now, I know the line items in this category are very important to the operation of evolving the correction system and improving it for Albertans, and obviously to get people through that system and back into mainstream society. But I'm hoping you could break down some of the numbers we're seeing here to clarify how this will make a difference for us. So can the Minister, again through the Chair, please explain how this funding will be allocated and how it will benefit Albertans both inside and outside of the system?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the increase in the division's budget is related to a number of key areas. Folks who are housed in custody in the province have increased to pre-pandemic levels. So what that means is that folks that are supervised in the community and in custody in line with public safety measures and supervision, which Albertans should and do expect. On any given day, there are about 3,000 folks in custody in our 10 correctional facilities and about 15,000 folks who are supervised in the community. And there's various levels and differentiation of conditional release. Most of them, I assume, are on stat release for those 15,000. So that's about a $10 million increase to budget for that reason. Savings related to labor mandate savings were not realized, and this funding has been reinstated in the 22-23 budget. So that's about $7 million increase to budget. Money as well was transferred from advanced education to support inmate education and rehabilitative programs. This is not an increase in overall funding, but it is an increase to the Correctional Services Division, as this funding was previously part of the Advanced Ed budget. Just over $5 million increase to budget from Advanced Ed. And then we as a province continue to operate the lowest per diem for custody costs in the country and have about 300 more people on average per day than we did last year.
Thank you so much, Minister. Back to the Honourable Member.
Great. Thank you again to the Minister through the Chair. Really glad to hear some of the Advanced Ed opportunities there as well. Just in continuing with this line of questioning, on line 8.4, correctional programs and services specifically, we're seeing about a $5 million increase in this line item alone. And of course, we're looking for measurable outcomes. So what are some of the measurable outcomes that we as Albertans should see from this particular budget increase, and what your objectives are, and again, those measurable outcomes that you hope to achieve from that increase?
Well, and thank you,
so
Madam
much,
Chair.
Member. Minister.
And through to the member for the question. So that is the Advanced Ed portion. So measurable outcomes, I mean, what I would say is a former member of the National Parole Board, I mean, what we want to make sure when folks are returning to the community, whether on conditional release or when they're at warrant expiry, that they have some opportunity to get programming in an institution to help with them understanding their triggers, for example, or just help them better with rehabilitative services so that when they do return to the community, they're less likely to reoffend, that they have a release plan that's going to help make sure that they're successful, or if they're an expiry, that they're successfully back integrated into the community and going to be successful and not reoffend. So the measurable outcomes would be looking at the ways in which we are continuing to support offenders who are in our institutions, making sure they're getting those supports, they have successful release plans, that they're not reoffending when they're on either stat release or after warrant expiry.
Thank you, Minister. Member?
Thank you. So maybe just a quick follow-up on that. So would the rate of recidivism be one of your outcome measures on that specifically?
Well, maybe I'll impose on Assistant Deputy Minister Kulita to answer that question.
Thank you. Yes, certainly rate of reoffending is an indicator. Successful completion of programs are indicators of our interim measures, I would suggest, of that. The amount of program that an individual takes is typically related to a successful outcome. So those are the types of initiatives we're tracking.
Thank you for that clarification. And through the chair, Minister, the Alberta Security Infrastructure Program funding was increased from $1 million to $5 million in this year's budget on page 135 of the fiscal plan. From what I can see, this program works to facilitate infrastructure improvements, very important, I think, probably with some aging infrastructure, that might diminish the risk of hate or bias-motivated crime in communities. I know you referenced that in some of your earlier responses. Can you explain to us the reasoning behind this and how this will increase the support and the safety of Albertans at risk of hate crimes, and obviously many of those in our ethnic and religious communities?
Thank you. Member Minister?
And thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member. So the increase in the funding was really just a response to the significantly high demand from vulnerable Albertans who are at risk of being targeted by hate or a bias-motivated crime. And because of that high demand, that was the reason for more than doubling the program, because we had seen so many applicants. And the second question, I think, was how is that going to support folks who are at risk of a hate crime? So it would support those folks who are at risk of a hate crime by supporting the funding to support security infrastructure needs, people who either worship at or work at, or even if it's a community center or a school, folks who are attending these facilities when they are serving a vulnerable community deserve to be feeling safe. And we've seen, as the member mentioned, Madam Chair, some of the crimes that we've seen throughout the last few years, the rash of violence against last summer against certain places of worship, including the Vietnamese church, where we announced on last Sunday the increase in the funding. Seeing they've done a lot of work to rehabilitate that church, but seeing the photos and seeing how badly the crime made that entire population feel insecure. Folks who are at risk of that hate crime, just making them feel secure again in their community. These are really important facilities that people need to be able to feel safe in.
Thank you, Minister. Member? Thank
you, Madam Chair. And I think that's an admirable approach to this. I'm glad to see that funding as an Albertan of Jewish heritage. We see an increase in anti-Semitism, and certainly what's happened around the globe. I think we have to be very cognizant of that. And I do hope you're working with the Minister of Culture and Status of Women as well, so that we can go and maybe improve how we're moving forward with educating people and creating a more just and welcoming society. So thank you for that. Minister, through the chair again, I see on page 155 of the estimates document under line 5.3 that budget 2022 includes a significant increase in the budget of the Chief Medical Examiner's Office. Again, you mentioned that a little earlier. close to $4 million to be more precise. I understand that this office's primary function is to investigate unexplained deaths in Alberta and even maintains a centre in forensic pathology and toxicology, which of course is an advancing science and a more precise one, certainly in the last 10 or 20 years. Can you please elaborate on what benefits this increase in budget for the Chief Medical Examiner will bring to that office and to Albertans in terms of us, I guess, overseeing and providing greater insights into the forensic world? Thank you.
Thank you, Member. Minister?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And first, the suggestion that when it comes to the ASIP grants, that we should be working more closely with the Minister of Culture and the Status of Women. That's fantastic advice. The Associate Ministers of the Status of Women, the Associate Minister for the Status of Women in particular has been very helpful in helping us reach out to communities, helping us with town halls and engaging with folks, making sure that they're aware of those grants. And then my former colleague in Labour and Immigration, the Associate Minister of Immigration and Multiculturalism, obviously, because he was also there for us with the announcement on Sunday, has a strong passion as well and has been helping us reach out to many different vulnerable communities to make sure that they're aware and, of the program and those opportunities. For the OCME, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner, good question, Madam Chair, through you to the member. The Office of the Chief Medical Examiner is committed to providing high quality and timely service for the deceased and their care, to help with grieving families, find closure during a traumatic time in the lives of those folks. So Budget 22, that investment will help the OCME to meet the demands of modern forensics, quite frankly, and to better serve current and future generations of Albertans. And Budget 22 also provides $40 million in capital funding over 4 years to help construct a new Calgary facility for the OCME. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Minister. Member, do you have more questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you.
Please proceed.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you to the Minister. Again, of course, we're all experts on forensics, but we're just watching late-night TV, so we can find all that out these days. So thank you for your comments on that, and I hope that we can reach those high marks in that area. Minister, I'm going to shift my questions a little bit over to the courts. Again, a big issue and an emerging issue and concern, I think, across this province in terms of dealing with that and advancing and evolving the system. Budget 2022 includes significant increases in fundings to the 3 levels of courts in our province, and specifically on line 2 of estimates documents, it outlines the Provincial Court, Alberta Court of Queen's Bench, and the Alberta Court of Appeal are receiving funding increases of $7 million, $5 million, and $500,000 million respectively. So some good numbers, I guess, in terms of that. But I think we want to hear about some qualitative things. So could you maybe elaborate a little bit more on how this funding will improve Albertans' access to justice and to help fulfill our commitment to end the court backlogs, which we hear about quite consistently?
Thank you, Member. Minister?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, the whole point is to reflect our commitment to improving access to justice, to make sure that our court system is equipped to meet the needs of Albertans, and we are seeing increased funding for all 3 levels of courts in the province. So the Provincial Court, also the Court of Queen's Bench, also the Court of Appeal, and the increased funding is going to be used in a few ways. First, to modernize court services, because we are seeing the justice system return to pre-pandemic levels and to a pre-pandemic normal. So we want to make sure that we are increasing funding to modernize those court services and make sure that we're dealing with the volume. And then the capital funding will also be used to help in those efforts by expanding video conferencing capacity in our courtrooms, as we've seen the pandemic really push the court system into an accelerated way in modernizing their approach to access to the courtrooms.
Thank you, Minister. Member?
Great, thank you, Minister, and thank you for those increases. Again, through the chair, Minister, I've been combing through the estimates documents because I don't have to spend too much time combing through my hair. It appears to me, based on line 5.5, on page 155 that this year's budget shows no increases in funding for Legal Aid Alberta. Now, I'm sure that I'm not the only one who finds this decision interesting and perhaps concerning. Even if line numbers for 2022, 2023 are in line with previous budgets, it seems to me that there may be, in our government, that an opportunity to do more for low-income Albertans in terms of access to legal services.
That's our time. It's now going to move over to the official opposition. Please proceed, Honourable Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I do want to start by noting that it's ironic that Minister of Justice has taken a completely different approach with questions from the government than questions from the opposition, but that's fine, be that as it may. The first question related to 2.1, which also includes money for business and technology supports. So my question is that what Ministry is doing to make sure that all online resources are available in one place, such as Alberta Code website login information for WebEx for all region. And that's important because there are many who are self-represented, and there are many who may not have access to technology and all those things. So what we are doing to make sure that we have the supports in place to help those Albertans navigate and obtain the correct information. Second question is with respect to line 2.2, that includes maintenance, enforcement, child support. So what's the workload for maintenance enforcement? What's the workload for child support? And has the workload per person increased within those departments? And if so, how you're addressing that? With respect to line 2.3, 2.4, and 2.5, all three courts, question I have is, do you have the full complement of judges in all courts? And how many vacancies are there in each court? And also, I'm hearing from many in my riding in the communities I represent, and I've talked to some in legal community as well, that courts are not providing interpreters for family and civil matters, which impacts their access to justice, which impacts access to justice for marginalized communities, and they rely on volunteers who are not trained to interpret legal proceedings, which complicates issues further and also takes more court time as well. So is there any money in this budget to provide interpretation services for civil and family matters? And I do understand that there's a language helpline that exists, but that doesn't help. So are there any plans to add those services to ensure access to justice for those who may have language barriers or who are marginalized? With respect to 2.3, I'm pretty sure that you have heard about the public outcry against the changes that were made to traffic ticket court, the new fees that were added to fight tickets, 7 days deadline, and how these actions violate the principles of justice and access to justice. So my question is that do you still plan to move ahead with all those changes? Also, I'm hearing that the Justice of Peace counter remain closed and have not reopened after the COVID. Will that open again? And another thing is that, like, you will agree with me that courts are supposed to be impartial and accessible to all Albertans, and digitalizing the court process is good, but it is also creating barriers in encouraging systemic barriers for those who don't have access to technology, who don't have access to internet. So what steps specifically the partner will take to make sure that those who don't have access to technology, who are not well versed in using that technology, have the access to justice. There is some increase in ALRI, which is good. No question there.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member, and we'll turn the time over to the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member. Again, thank you for these questions. I think really thoughtful questions for all of these. So thank you. First, I'll start with the question related to business and technology supports, and in particular, there was a concern for those who are self-represented who may not have. I hope I'm accurately describing the question, but the concern was about self-represented litigants who wouldn't have access to online resources. That was the concern, right? I hope that I got that right. Perhaps if I could impose on Deputy Minister to talk about what or is it somebody else?
No, I can certainly.
For that answer. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair, to the member. The issue of technology and the changes that we're making to the courts and using, basically something that's not available to all people is a real concern. And we've had conversations with a number of stakeholders. The term that they use is technology poverty. And so we're very much aware that as we build these changes into our court systems, there has to be a mechanism or resources available to those people that would not otherwise be able to access the courts. So it's very much something that we're alive to. While right now we are very much focused on the core change to the court systems to make use of digitalization, we are also looking at the same time as to how do we increase those resources, whether it's through legal aid or through other providers, to make sure that they have access. We've had conversations with our court, the libraries that support the courts. They're a conduit that may very well be available where services can be provided. So we are looking at how to make sure that as we advance and modernize the courts, we are not leaving people behind, especially those that are very much in need of the supports that government can provide. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'm going to jump around a little bit with these questions, Madam Chair. I really appreciate the question regarding interpretation services, and it was specifically about family and civil matters. I can say there is an increase in funding from Canada for this. It's a matter that's under consideration, and we are looking at further ways in which we might be able to expand access to interpretation services. So fantastic question. Really appreciated that one, and it is something we're going to continue to look at. For the Justice Transformation Initiative, I would say, first of all, that there have been no decisions made, that there were proposals that were developed internally, but there have been no decisions made. The question was whether or not we were going to continue to proceed with those internal proposals. I would say that, that is a transportation issue. I defer that answer to the Minister of Transportation for that question. Regarding the vacancies, we do have vacancies in both provincial court and Court of Queen's Bench, but the specific numbers, Deputy Minister, do you mind me imposing on you for that answer?
Certainly, Minister. Our understanding is that at the provincial court level, there's 6 to 8. It depends on how you count the vacancies. We have a number of judges that are part-time, and so right now we have actively 6 to 8 positions that would be considered vacant. In the QB level, we have actually looked to the federal government to add 4 additional positions for the QB. So we are looking to the federal government to appoint 2 new justices in Grand Prairie and 2 more justices in Red Deer. I believe there's a couple of vacancies that are now that have occurred within QB. The Court of Appeal has a number of vacancies. I'd have to get back to you with those numbers. But there is one current vacancy, that position that has never been filled by the federal government, that the Minister is actively seeking to have the federal government appoint. So a number of years ago there was a position created, but the federal government has never staffed that one. But we'll get back to you with the actual vacancy numbers. Thank you.
Thank you. And then the last question that I think hasn't been addressed was regarding maintenance enforcement and child support and the workload, if it's increasing, and to what extent we're addressing those increases. Do you mind me imposing on you again, Deputy Minister?
Actually, Minister, if I may, I would ask Assistant Deputy Minister Barb Martini to speak to that one. Sorry. My apologies, Barb Turner, sorry.
Barb Turner, hi. I don't know the exact volumes, but I do know that they've gone to a case management system where each worker does a cradle-to-grave approach to the files, and my understanding is it's working very well.
Thank you so much, member. Now we'll go to the independent member for his questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Back and forth or block time?
Block time is okay.
Block time?
Thank you.
Yeah, okay, no problem. Okay, thank you very much, Minister, for being here today, and thank you to the Minister's staff and department for being here too. Appreciate your attendance and look forward to just some friendly questions and answers here. I'll start on page 79 of the business plan under revenue. And I'm just wondering, what are the various revenue streams that contribute to fines and penalties, and why is it projected to increase in estimate 22-23 versus previous actual and forecasts? And again, on page 79, under revenue, what is included in other revenue, and why does it increase dramatically for estimate 22-23 versus the actuals from previous years? And next question, under page 79, business plans expense, under public security. I'm presuming that's where the RCMP funding comes from. And I guess I'm just kind of curious here, the RCMP versus provincial police force discussion is, I guess, is a bit controversial. There's, when I talk to people, a lot of people I talk to are interested in the provincial police, but when I talk to municipalities, they seem to be very much in favor of sticking with the RCMP. So there's that kind of back and forth there, and I think a lot of the discussion is relates around. I think the average person is considering that going with the provincial police may help kind of, develop a bit of a break from Ottawa to Alberta, and so I think they would like to see a little bit of a distancing there. But when I look at the Province of Alberta Provincial Police Service Agreement dated April 1st, 2012, which I believe is the most current one, and in particular 6.1 and 6.4. 6.1 says the provincial minister will set the objectives, priorities, and goals of the provincial police service, which is the RCMP. And then Article 6.4 says nothing in this agreement will be interpreted as limiting in any way the jurisdiction of Alberta in respect of the administration of justice and law enforcement in the province. So I guess my question is how much control does do you as the Justice Minister have in how the RCMP goes about doing their job as far as objectives, priorities, and goals, and that jurisdiction of provincial basis? And my final question is a lot of the concerns I hear within communities, especially when it comes to rural crime, is the catch and, they call it catch and release, where people are caught and then tend to reoffend many times before they're actually, something actually happens with them. So that's a great concern, and I'm just wondering what your department and what yourself are doing to alleviate those concerns. So I'll leave my questions there, and you can have the rest of the time to answer. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member, and over to the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first, regarding the increases in fine revenue, as stated previously, this is increases in volume that we saw over the last couple of years, decreases in volume, and so we did see decreases in fine revenue as a result of decreases in volume. We're now expecting there to be returning to pre-pandemic levels of volume, so that's why there's that bump there. For the breakdown regarding other revenue, I'm going to impose on Assistant Deputy Minister Smith to answer that one.
Thank you, Minister. So through the chair, the elements in that line for fines and penalties, there's ticket processing, There is provincial fine retentions, there's traffic sheriffs, there's federal surcharges, and then there's the Safe Roads initiatives, and a very, very small amount in other revenues. So, but by and large, those are the major elements: ticket processing, fine retention, traffic sheriffs, and federal surcharges.
Thank you. Next, there were questions about the RCMP and questions related to the work investigating whether or not to proceed with an Alberta provincial police, and if there was, what would that model look like? And so there was the PwC report, which was investigating various options that might be included, and now there's an engagement process to get feedback from Albertans on that issue and that report. So I'd had answered these questions previously from Member Barnes. I'd refer the member perhaps to those answers, but maybe to supplement what I had said previously. And actually, maybe going to, because I didn't answer this question, the member asked specifically, what control do I, as a justice minister, have? I can set the priorities on behalf of government to work with the RCMP and establish priorities for them. But at that point, then all of the operations are left to the RCMP, and there isn't civilian oversight over anything further than that, other than perhaps removing the division commander. So there isn't a lot of civilian oversight right now that's provided in either the PPSA, the Provincial Police Service Agreement, or the MPSAs, the Municipal Police Service Agreements, which is one of the reasons why, in my answer to Member Barnes, I had highlighted that right now the framework for that we have right now with the RCMP as a vendor for both the provincial police and the municipal police services for various communities is that we don't have civilian led oversight for the recruitment of a detachment commander. We don't have civilian led oversight of complaints, or even just establishing at a more local level the priorities of a community and oversight of performance in that community. So there are a number of concerns, and whether I believe whether it's a provincial police or otherwise, I think we have some very big concerns with the PPSA and the MPSAs. There's 47 of the MPSAs to the province that we have to work with the federal government to address these, and work with municipal leaders who have concerns. And I'd also say this too. I hear as well, Madam Chair, through you to the member, that we have municipal leaders, we have folks in rural Alberta who really strongly support our RCMP officers, and I agree with them. This isn't an attack on our RCMP. This isn't a criticism of our RCMP. I think all Albertans really appreciate and thank all of our sworn members in our rural communities for doing all the work that they do to keep our communities safe. It's a matter of us working with them, working with the federal government, working with the municipal leaders to address these 9 really big gaps that I had highlighted in my answer to Member Barnes, to be able to figure out whatever the solution is going to be, because we do need to figure out how to provide better civilian-led oversight of policing throughout rural Alberta. Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to yield the remaining time.
All right, and with that, we will go over to the official opposition. Please proceed, member. Oh, sorry. Oh, we finished with you. I'm so sorry. My deepest apologies. We go now to the government side. And we're going to Member Walker.
Thank you so much, Chair, colleagues, Minister, through the Chair. Great to see you here, as well as your colleagues. This has been a wonderful discussion. I've learned a lot. Some really good dialogue on lots of important topics. And I would also just say that some of my questions, Minister, will cover courts, which are critically important in the application of justice for Albertans, as is the actual physical infrastructure. At some point, we really look forward to having you out for a tour of the Sherwood Park Courthouse. Appreciate that. That will be great. It's a very important piece of infrastructure in my riding. And I also want to say as well, this Alberta Security Infrastructure Enhancement Grant more than doubling. This is a wonderful announcement. It's going over so well, especially as MLA Godfrey had pointed out with minority communities, vulnerable communities, and I'm just over the moon about that. So thank you for that amazing support for Albertans, particularly in our religious communities, our multicultural communities. That's just absolutely amazing. Minister, do you want to do block time or back and forth?
I'm happy either way.
Okay, great. So on page 161 of the estimates documents, it shows in your ministry statement of operations that there is a decrease in expenditure for the Victims of Crime and Public Safety Fund. I can see that the estimated expenditure for this year is back in line with our 2021-2022 budget. But given that this is such an important initiative, I find it rather curious that we're seeing an 11% cut in here rather than an increase. Minister, why was there no population and inflation-based increase to this to funding in this year? As well, Minister, our government made a commitment to Albertans to reduce the court backlog. So I'm curious, I'm sure I'm not the only member here who's happy to see that key objective 3.2 on page 78 of the business plans is committed to improving Albertans' access to services and reducing red tape. With that in mind, it's interesting that this year's budget shows that funding for Crown prosecution services is lower than in the 2020 fiscal year. Will our government be able to fulfill this commitment to reducing the court backlog and red tape while also minimizing the burden on taxpayers? In 2019, our government ensured Albertans that we would hire 50 new Crown prosecutors to help reduce the backlog in our courts. Now, page 78 of the business plan reiterates the same commitment. Your ministry's initiative supporting its key objectives from Outcome 2 indicate that your ministry has already hired 40 of these additional prosecutors. Furthermore, I see in the same supporting initiative that your ministry also accepted 20 new articling students. Can you elaborate on how these additional Crown prosecutors, Minister, will help reduce our court backlog? As well, what is it important for your ministry? Why is it important for your ministry to train articling students? And then just finally here, Minister, on the theme of courts. Our courts are still using many outdated processes and technology. This obviously slows down processing times and adds unnecessary obstacles for your ministry's services. I see that objective 3.2 on page 78 of the business plan shows a commitment to implementing digital transformation so that Albertans can have better access to services and our system is more sustainable. Can you explain, Minister, how Budget 2022 will support the transition to a more digitized and efficient court system? And I think I'll just bulk those questions as they're all themed around courts. I say through the chair. Minister, if you'd like to answer.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. And we'll turn the time over to the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the member. So the first question regarding the Victims of Crime and Public Safety Initiative Fund. Thank you for the question, because I think I was asked about this as well by Member Barnes and didn't get a chance to answer it. But it begins with the MLA-led review of victim services in Alberta that was chaired by Members Pitt and Newdorf. And so we are now in the process of completing our review of that report and the recommendations that came out of that review that was done by those led by those two members. The focus of that report was on how victim services are delivered in the province and the types of supports and services that are provided to someone who is a victim of crime. We expect to have our review of that report completed in early in this fiscal year, and as such, the funding levels were maintained at the 21-22 budgeted amounts. Once we're done, our review of, and subsequent decisions are made after a review of that report, we'll then be arranging any new budget requirements to support the any of the approved changes to the victim services funding, including assistance to victims, organizations, and victims of crime. So it does begin with us with that, finishing a review of that report and then taking any decisions at that point. For the court backlog question, the total funding for the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service is slightly higher in budget 22, over 108 million, 108.7 million, versus budget 21, which was I think just 200 million less, 108.5 million. So that includes funding for new Crown prosecutors paid through the Victims of Crime and Public Safety Initiatives Fund. Regarding the question, you had a question regarding 50 new Crown prosecutors to help reduce the backlog in the courts. So for that question, government made good on its commitment to add these 50 new Crown prosecutor positions by this fiscal year. As of February of 22, there are more than 47 more trial prosecutors working within the Crown Prosecution Service than in 2019, and work is actively underway to fill the remaining 3 new positions. Hiring more Crown prosecutors is essential to addressing the increased caseloads and ensuring that viable criminal cases can proceed. Work continues to fill existing Crown prosecutor vacancies. We have ongoing job competitions, and we increase the size, as you mentioned, the articling program to ultimately grow the ranks of the Crown Prosecution Service. With the lifting of the salary freeze, it's anticipated that recruitment and retention challenges will decrease. In September of 21 of last year, the overall vacancy rate for trial prosecutors was over 10%. And then on February, just last month, in February of last month, it had fallen to 6.8%. On top of that, the Crown Prosecution Service has also undertaken early reclassification of legal officers to further bolster retention efforts. That reclassification helps to ensure that legal officers are receiving compensation which is in line with their assessed legal experience. And that compensation then aligns with the complexity and the volume of their caseloads. So early reclassification, key component of our retention strategy, will continue, and will be required to continue with dedicated funding support. The proposed budget in 22 targets, they don't include an immediate ask for the ACPS. This need will be reassessed in the future as recruitment to both the new positions and existing vacancies is completed and vacancy rates continue to decline. The member, Madam Chair, asked about the articling students. Training those articling students will allow government to bring in new talented lawyers early in their career and enable them to gain that experience to promote a career within the Crown Prosecution Service. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much.
So we have 8 seconds left. So we're going to turn it over now to the official opposition for their next round of questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Sabir. I understand you're going next.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question about line item 4. What's the total number of Crown prosecutor working for prosecution services, and what's the vacancy? And the new terminology, trial prosecutor, including those. And legal aid office, in particular in Calgary, is closed for in-person appointment. When will that resume? 7.3, provincial security intelligence, what kind of information gathering they're responsible for? 7.4 line item, there is, where did it go? There is law enforcement oversight. Budget is down from 11 million to 9.8 million. Why is there a reduction? And does this include Law Enforcement Review Board? Because I would assume their workload has gone up. And with respect to police oversight, Minister, you have made some comments. So my question is, are you intending to have a provincial, broader civilian oversight? And with respect to 7.7, it's flat at 89 million, so there is no increase for inflation and population growth for municipalities' police services. And with respect to correction services, hearing were done through CCTV camera during the COVID, while in-person hearing resume anytime soon. And there's one last question. 8.5, which includes police training. So the question I have is, with respect to that training, that will that include anti-racism and anti-bias training, and who prepared that, who is delivering that kind of questions. And one last question I have with respect to Alberta Human Rights, that's a new line item. Can you provide the breakdown of these funds? And Madam Chair, will I be able to cede my time
Sure.
to my colleague?
Sure.
Yeah.
And who's going to proceed then?
Thank you, Member. Thank you, Madam Chair. So, through you, my question to the Minister. I'll try to be quick, as given the time limit. Minister, I will go a little bit back, but I hope it will become clear why. I understand that some of this precedes you, but hopefully your officials can provide some additional details. Under your estimates, line item 6, Alberta Human Rights described its mandate to foster equality and reduces discrimination by eliminating barriers to full participation in the cultural, social, economic, and political life of the province for all Albertans. In 2021, the government entered the Assistant to the Human Rights Education and Multiculturalism Funds line item, which was $1.735 million in 2018 to 2019, and reduced to $500,000 in the budget, 2029 and 2019 to 2020. And given that this was done a while ago, I was wondering if the Ministry has done any analysis on the outcomes of the fund ending. Has it affected any outcomes for human rights? I noticed there was a slight increase to the item of 6. Were any of the functions amalgamated into this one line item? Could the Minister elaborate on these questions, please? And another one I have some questions related to the recommendations of the Alberta Anti-Racism Advisory Council recommendations. My colleague has touched on that somewhat, but I was hoping if you could break out precisely where the funding is in your estimates to support the recommendations that are specific to the Ministry of Justice and Solicitor General. One of them was advancing human dignity in education. It is mostly focused on public education, but given that we just talked about human rights education, I was hoping you could also shed some light on there is work being done under line item of 6 of the estimates to support recommendations such as this. So I have raised a number of questions, like multiculturalism got big hit in this budget. I would really be helpful for me, any information regarding these questions I can have from the Ministry.
Thank you so much, Honourable Member, and now over to the Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you to the members for their questions. So first, I had the first question, the total number of Crown working in the province right now, and sorry, ADM Goddard. I'll ask Madam Chair for Assistant Deputy Minister Goddard to assist with that answer.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I can advise that Kim Goddard, Assistant Deputy Minister for the Alberta Crown Prosecution Service. I can advise that the total number of legal officers working for us is 453. 383 of them are trial prosecutors. The difference between those numbers is the trial prosecutor numbers doesn't include people working in the bail office, appeals, or policy and project council.
Thank you so much.
In terms of vacancies, it's 6.8% vacancy for trial prosecutors, 9.2% vacancy for all legal officers. That's largely in part to some additional positions added to the Crown Bail Office within the past couple months. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. The next question, I think, was about the Provincial Security Intelligence Office at line 7.3. And for that, I'm going to ask Assistant Deputy Minister DeGrand to come again to speak to that line item.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's Marlon DeGrand, the Assistant Deputy Minister of Public Security Division. The Provincial Security and Intelligence Office consists of three discrete units in a relationship to a fourth. The first is the Provincial Security Office, which used to be referred to as the Departmental Security Office. They're responsible for providing advice and assistance across government in relation to the security of Government of Alberta employees and Government of Alberta properties. The Provincial Intelligence Office is another discrete unit which provides advice and assessment around ongoing threats that may be posed to Albertans, the Government of Alberta, or Alberta interests, and it provides security advice as well as a security assessment process. And finally, we have the Integrated Threat and Risk Assessment Center, which is a domestic violence threat assessment unit, which works closely with police and victims of domestic violence to conduct security risk assessments and assist in the development of security plans for victims of domestic violence. And finally, that unit has a relationship of support and operational relationship with the Chief Firearms Office. Thank you.
Thank you. And then, Madam Chair, we were then asked about line 7.4. This is the law enforcement oversight part of the budget. And the change of funding for the law enforcement oversight branch reflects a structural change that split the branch into two departments. So the LEO and the Provincial Security and Intelligence Office branch. So no funding was lost there. As I alluded to in an answer I provided to colleagues opposite. And it's a big branch. There's quite a few program areas under the LEO branch. This includes everything from being responsible for Amber Alerts, high-risk offenders, Claire's law notifications. It also administers the Civil Forfeiture Act that allows government to pursue forfeiture of proceeds of crime and property used to carry out crime. The integrated community safety as well, that promotes a consistent approach to addressing prolific offenders using formalized processes and the creation of collaborative teams. Security services and investigations, the body armor control program area, peace officer program, policing standards and audits. It's a big program. There's no funding lost. It was really the splitting of the division into two different divisions there. Next, I think, was a question regarding correction services. No?
No,
sorry.
I think so. I think it was.
Okay, great. So line item 6.
That's human rights.
For the human rights. Well, I'll speak generally. Maybe you can supplement the answer. So what the budget is providing for, because I think it was a breakdown that was requested for, and what's estimated in 22-23 was 6.913 million. So what this provides for is 55% of it, or 3.8 million, is for salaries, wages, and employee benefits. 3.1 million, or 45% of the operating budget, that's for supplies and services, and we have 54 FTEs there in that line item there. Anything else, Deputy Minister?
Thank you so much, Minister. We'll turn back over to the government side, and Honourable Member Fry.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Minister, through the Chair to your staff, I want to say thank you to all department staff, political staff who are here today. Often the work of staff who are largely unseen but do an incredible amount of work is underappreciated by the public, and I just wanted to say thank you very much to the ADMs, DMs, and all those who are present today to answer our questions and be accountable. Minister, as you know, I was the chair of the Alberta Firearms Advisory Council, and we were part of assembling that group. I see Marlon in the audience today, so thank you very much, Mr. DeGrand, for all the work that you did as well. So, Minister, under Key Objective 2.3 of the business plan, your ministry is noted as advancing the Fair Deal Panel's recommendations, and for firearms owners in the province, getting the Office of the Chief Firearms Officer setup was very important, and you touched on the accomplishments of Ms. Bryant, who I agree is exceptionally qualified, and if anyone's met her, she's pretty awesome. As far as talking to her for 5 minutes, you'll learn more about firearms and firearms policy than you could from reading, I think, a dozen books, but she's just a wealth of information. So, Minister, I was curious if you could comment on the status of the Office of the Chief Provincial Firearms Officer, what is happening there, what can Albertans expect, and if we're sharing time, I guess I'll hand it over to you.
Well, thank you. And first, that falls into 3.1, correct? The Civil Law Division?
Oh, no, civil forfeiture, no.
I'll impose on Assistant Deputy Minister DeGrand for that answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, the status of the Chief Firearms Office is that they've undertaken to hire and have completed hiring of all of the staff now to take over the operations of the Chief Firearms Program here in the province of Alberta from the federal government. They are currently dealing with a large backlog of files that were handed over to them as they came on board, and the office is actually quite operational and engaged in their duties.
Go, Madam Chair? Okay, thank you. So thank you for the update on that. I want to change course here to the opioid epidemic and the justice system's role in that. So under Objective 1.1, it states that you will continue to work with policing partners and municipal leaders to address drivers of crime, including focus work on rural crime, which is obviously very important in my constituency, drug trafficking and proceeds of crime. I know that we had allotted money for drug treatment courts, as well as had worked very hard to ensure that we are getting harmful drugs off the streets. And I noticed that, I think it was also Mr. DeGrand noted about ACERT and the work that they've done in the South. I think there was one of the largest drug busts in history, which is exactly what we need to get these off the street. But Minister, as you know, the opioid epidemic has not spared Alberta, and drug addiction has been exacerbated by the social isolation of cyclical lockdowns during the COVID-19 pandemic. At the start of the pandemic, it was necessary, of course, to encourage and require physical distancing, but the mental health toll of isolations policies is often ignored. So, Minister, can you elaborate on whether or not Alberta has seen an increased crime rate associated with increased drug usage in the past 2 years, and what we are doing about it?
Thank you so much, Member.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through to the member. So it's always difficult to specifically attribute the drivers of crime, and particularly violent crime. During the last 5 years, the province has experienced significant impacts as a result of the global recession and the collapse of the energy sector in the province, beginning in 2014, 2015. Further, we have seen an increase in the prevalence of methamphetamine fueled crime across the province, and that's both in rural areas as well as within our urban centers. Many of the police services have indicated that they have seen significant violent and property crime that's associated to that disturbing trend. And it's for that reason that we have increased funding to alert, with one of the specific focuses of that new investment being on addressing organized crime and drug trafficking, specifically in both fentanyl and methamphetamine, which law enforcement, as I said, have reported as an increasingly dangerous component of the crime and violence that they're facing in our communities in the province. Regarding the opioid epidemic and the ways in which the pandemic has made that more difficult. Increasingly in recent years, our police services have noted an increase in the prevalence of crime that's associated with the opioid crisis, and competition between those who deal in these harmful substances and the violent and criminal behaviors associated with the drugs has been noted as a significant driver of social disorder, a significant driver of crime and harm in our communities. And so, again, one of the reasons why we increased funding to alert to be able to address drug trafficking, organized crime, specifically for those drivers. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister. Honourable Member.
Thank you very much, Minister, for that response. And you talked about social disorder, which I think is something that's really interesting to focus on because rural crime is obviously an enormous problem. I mean, in my constituency alone, there's people who wait up to an hour or 2 hours for police to respond, and that's no fault of the police. It's a systemic issue. So with response times in rural Alberta that are such that farmers, ranchers, homesteaders, these people don't live in the urban luxury of having police respond in 5 minutes. So it's often up to them to take care of themselves, their family, and their property, and it can get very worrisome for those who are out maybe in more remote areas who don't have access to the police being 5 minutes away. So I know our government undertook rigorous rural crime tours in previous years, and mostly pre-pandemic, to hear directly from what rural Albertans want from their law enforcement. And under the same objective, Minister, what has your department implemented or is planning to implement to reduce rural crime?
Thank you so much, Honourable Member. Minister.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So first, the introduction of the police funding model allowed government to reinvest in the growth of the provincial police service to levels that were not seen for in decades. And this is allowing the RCMP to have the resources then to develop a robust response to real crime in the province, developing initiatives to free up police time and to target prolific offenders and criminal groups while also enhancing services to those who are victimized by crime. Beyond that, government has invested, as I said, in the growth of Alert, expanding its further reach into rural Alberta, helping target those who are preying on Albertans. We've also launched the Rapid Response Initiative, the Rapid Response Program. So what this did is it designed, it was used to leverage 400 of our sheriffs to augment and support the RCMP provincial policing complement to reduce the response times to crisis events and free up valuable police resources in rural Alberta. For example, by reducing the amount of police resources that are required from traffic matters to be able to more fully focus RCMP time on rural crime efforts. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Minister. Member?
Yes. So on a different vein, as you know, I represent the city of Brooks, which is the city of 100 hellos, which means that we have a lot of diversity and many minority groups who are calling Brooks their home. I'm very proud of the work that Newell Safe Communities has done through the RCMP to kind of bridge the gaps between those who maybe don't feel as comfortable with police, those who are worried about bias and systemic issues. So I'm curious. Minister, I'm sure you know this is a very difficult subject, and one plainly does not trust an institution because of historical wrongdoings, and yet something like hate-motivated crime is perpetrated against those who are most likely to have that difficult relationship with police in the beginning. So for a problem that relies on collaboration between sides, Minister, I'm wondering how you plan on working towards a positive objective of healing some of the division that exists in our communities, with law enforcement included.
Thank you, Member. Minister.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for the question. And I did talk a little bit about some of the work that we are doing when it comes to hate-motivated crimes and crimes that are committed against vulnerable Albertans. Perhaps to further complement those answers, though, maybe I'll impose again either on Assistant Deputy Minister Cooley or Assistant Minister. Is that right? Thank you.
So certainly the human trafficking and the work that's been done to prevent that is top of mind for the ministry. That the Alberta's Human Trafficking Task Force engaged with individual.
Thank you so much, Minister and his team, and we'll turn the time over now to the official opposition.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My first question relates to that line item 6. Before that, we used to have 8.2 assistance to human rights education and multiculturalism fund. Last budget reduced that fund to 0, and there were no grants in that. So is it still the case that the budget for any assistance to human rights education and multiculturalism fund is still 0 and there are no grants available? Second question again relates to victim of crime, page 161. I asked before, didn't get the answer, so we'll ask again. How much of this money is going directly to support victims? And second thing is that now program allows only 45 days to apply for the support, and it's extremely problematic in the cases of domestic violence and sexual abuse, where it typically takes much longer to report and then to apply for this fund. And there are even no more benefits if a child is witnessing a crime. Do you intend to stick with this criteria, or you want to make changes to this? Few questions relating to corrections and people who are held in custody. I've heard from community groups and advocates that there are many who are in our prisons, remand centers, that may face mental health issues. And typically the staff there, they may not necessarily be trained to deal with those mental health issues. Are there any plans, or is there any budget there to support those initiatives, in particular people who are facing mental health issues? And with respect to legal aid, no, with respect to 5.4, public guardian and trustee, last budget we heard that there was some funding for computer system upgrades, cloud system, so I would like to know the status of those changes. And also I want to know how many, what's the caseload is like and the staffing situation, and how many vacancies are there in that particular program. With respect to prosecutions, that's under it's under 4.1. In particular, when young people are going through the court processes, is there a legal requirement to have a duty counsel or counsel present when those matters are dealt with? And there was another question I skipped over. Again, with respect to digitalization initiative, I asked this again, and the question was answered by the Deputy Minister, but I didn't hear any specific initiatives that will be undertaken by the Ministry, or any specific sports that are out there that I can refer people to if they don't have access to internet, if they don't have access to computer, if they don't have access to cell phone, that how can they do that? And the last question with respect to traffic court changes it, that there are no longer in-person dispute mechanism available, so changes are already under the way. So can you comment on that as well?
Concludes your time, honourable member. We'll now turn it over to the last section of speaking time for this estimate section to the minister, and that'll wrap us up.
Well, thank you. Maybe I'll start with the question the member unfortunately had to repeat, because I didn't get a chance to, in a previous block, answer this. It was a question about the Victims of Crime Fund and the percentage. Well, it's the Victims of Crime and Public Safety Initiatives Fund. So the total amount is 62 5.887 million for that fund, and 38 million goes specifically to public safety initiatives. So that would be 60%. So the remainder would go to victims of crime from that fund. There's a question about what used to be line 8.2 from a few budgets ago, and then how that relates to line item 6. And maybe I'll ask Deputy Minister to speak to that and that change, because I understand those folks had moved over to the Human Rights Commission, but perhaps Deputy Minister, if you could clarify.
Thank you, Minister. Madam Chair. The Multiculturalism Fund was basically decommissioned a couple of years ago, and at this time there's been no indication that it will be reactivated. In terms of the staff that were managing that fund, all of them were moved into the sort of the Human Rights Commission proper to take on other functions there. And I think there was also a question earlier on from the member, Madam Chair, with respect to would there be a study or has there been any work done with respect to the impact of not having that fund anymore, and I can advise that no studies have been done. Thank you. Thank you,
Deputy Minister. The next question was mental health supports for those in institutions, and perhaps if I could impose on Assistant Deputy Minister Lavoie to come up to speak to that question.
Hello, Fiona Lavoie, Assistant Deputy Minister for the Correctional Services Division. Madam Chair, with respect to the question of mental health supports for individuals that are in custody, I can certainly advise that there's a number of different mechanisms that are employed to ensure the health and safety of individuals that we have. That's including supervision as well as interventions and counselling and programs. So we do work in partnership with Alberta Health Services for a number of those interventions, including medical expertise, social worker support, as well as psychology, psychiatry, as well as nursing staff members that help support that. So that's everything through our admission process to make sure that individuals are not at risk of self-harm throughout the continuum of mental health supports. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, I think, Madam Chair, was related to the Office of the Public Guardian and Trustee, and I think the member was talking about the fact that since 2007, the office had spent quite a bit of money in the last well over a decade modernizing its systems. There were project failures back in 2007, I believe. But despite those setbacks, and I think there was the vendor community was not exactly compliant with their bids, or vendors were disinterested. But the public trustee has retained a total of $5.3 million that is still producing value to the current project. The acronym is OPGTIS, and that project started in 2016. It may eventually merge into the new and modern guardian and trustee management systems, and the public trustee information systems in its first phases. It had been awarded to BDO Canada. The replacement of PTIS will go live in November of this year, of 22. The next question is about bail, I think, 4.1, line 4.1, and the requirement for duty counsel to attend. And Deputy Minister, if I could oppose on you for that question, I have to admit I may have not written down the question accurately, but did you catch the question?
Unfortunately, I did not, Minister, but I think I'll ask ADM Goddard to speak to that one.
Okay. Thank you.
I apologize, ADM, we're not going to get to your answer, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the Ministry's estimates has concluded. This concludes the consideration of the 2022-2023 main estimates by the Standing Committee on Families and Communities. Thank you, everyone. This meeting's adjourned.